Cotney Construction Law is dedicated to helping the construction industry in legal, risk, and safety challenges. Welcome to this week's Law and Mortar with John Kenney and Trent Cotney.
Welcome to another episode of Law and Mortar. As always, I am Trent Cotney, CEO of Cotney Construction Law, and I'm with my good friend John Kenney with Cotney Construction Law and Cotney Consulting Group. And John, we've got a lot of topics to discuss today, but something that's been on my mind is one of the things that I think is a consistent theme in the roofing industry is litigation. And, you know, going back in time, if you look at a lot of the critical cases that happen, whether it's from asbestos or, you know, dating back to the 1800s with the asphalt producers, there's a lot of stuff that came out of that litigation that changed the industry. And in addition to that, it actually records a lot of the facts of the roofing industry in those decisions. So one of the things that I was actually looking at the other day, and I'm sure you remember it, but back in the early 70s, there was the old bond ply system, the two-ply system. And if not the worst system ever created, it was probably up there. So what was your experience with that? Did you ever put any of that down? And you know what? I think you were in New Jersey at the time. What was it like, and what was your thoughts about it?
I did. My family business, my dad and at the time actually put down quite a few large roofs with that, which actually ended up in the litigation you're talking about. And luckily, in those days, they were bonded roofs. That's a little bit before they got into the warranties and the guarantees. So Celotex, who was the holding company, the whole system actually ended up paying to redo millions and millions and millions of square feet of roofing. And bond ply, when it came out, I believe it officially hit the systems, came out on the market around 70. It maybe lasted till 73, 74, started having problems earlier on. But like anything else, they hit it. The biggest problem with it was an unreinforced coated base sheet. There was no reinforcement in it, like the normal flashings, AB20s, and all the time all had a fabric reinforcement. Well, it was probably the greatest failure that came out, but it probably led to some of the more advanced systems we have today, because the whole purpose of that was to get away from 3, 4, and 5-ply systems and make asphalt-based systems compatible with single plies that they knew were coming on the market in a big way. So by doing this, the problem with it was not putting it down, not actually defects in the system. As soon as you went through a freeze-thaw cycle or a very heated day and a thunderstorm and it chilled 50, 60, 70 degrees or more, the roof split. It split almost endlessly because there was no reinforcements to stop it. So that's where the lawsuits came in. And I remember fixing a ton of splits and roofs to hold them over till the litigations were done and keep them watertight. So yes, it was a huge failure. Probably they wish they didn't do it. But because of that huge failure, they realized that they had to use reinforcement in what's today is our modified roofs. So that was probably, even though modifieds, if you read the roof report, came out earlier than that, they didn't hit the United States till about the mid-70s. So that's why people were a little apprehensive about using modifieds because of the failure with bond ply. But once they realized the reason was the non-reinforced to what we're using reinforced. So it's like anything else, sometimes you got to have an Etzel before you have the rocket ship. So that's really what it was.
Right. And I think, you know, everybody hates lawyers, but I think this was probably one time lawyers were a good thing, because I think what it did is kind of force the industry to take a look at it and realize what is the right way to do things. And now, you know, we have better products as a result. So something else I want to talk to you about, and this is a common occurrence in residential, but I know it happens, you know, regardless of whether you're doing residential, commercial, or industrial, and that is job site cleanup. On residential jobs in particular, we always get calls from residential roofers that are having customers that have stepped on nails or, you know, had some kind of problem where they've stepped on debris that's been out there and hurt themselves, or it's hurt other, you know, blown out a tire or something like that. And, you know, obviously I try to kind of deal with it contractually. One of the things that I like to do is to say, look, you know, in the contract, in the terms and conditions, we always keep them short for residential contracts because you don't want to scare your customer. But we're trying to educate them and say, look, we'll take best steps, best practices to make sure that we're eliminating these things. We'll do magnetic sweeps. We'll do that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, please take precautions, recognize that this might be an issue and you're assuming the risk if it is. What, in your experience, have you seen as far as job site cleanup, whether it's commercial or residential? What would you say some best practices are for our listeners?
Well, is definitely one of the first things you should do is take the time to put your tarps and different things around on the ground to protect it, because you're going to get debris. Always try to clean up daily, because what happens if you don't, a homeowner or the homeowner's tenants, apartment, whatever it is you're doing on the residential side, they're going to step on a nail, and that's even worse than getting a tire flat. So if you do that, and then, one thing that works most, unless you're using aluminum nails, I like to clarify that because I've heard that before, magnets work very well. You almost have to dedicate someone to rake and do it. It's not an easy process, but unfortunately you have to do it, because you're going to get people that are going to claim they have either flat tires or, like I said, worst case is going to be claiming they stepped on a nail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We had a claim a while back. Residential roofing contractor just finished a roof up, and the elderly customer stepped on the nail. They were diabetic. They ended up in the hospital. It was a significant claim. So, taking those contractual precautions, educating the homeowner, the customer about the potential possibility. But like you said, really taking the time, not just to do the magnetic sweeps, because that doesn't always pick up everything. And there's user error all the time with using that. So really what you want to do is make sure you have someone watching the project, going through, raking, taking a look at everything, removing the debris. Even taking photos is a great way to kind of identify what the existing conditions are. And it's worth the extra bit of time, because, I can't tell you how many times I've had a roofing contractor that hasn't received their final payment because someone has alleged they stepped on a nail or a nail blew out a tire. So I want to turn now to a couple of other things that I kind of like to talk about. One is we've got a couple of large storms out in the Atlantic right now. They haven't fully developed, but we are in hurricane season. And prior Lawn Motors, we've talked about everything from, tarping to crisis management to all those types of things. What I want to ask you, John, is for our listeners, especially there might be roofing contractors that are just getting started. How did you go about monitoring weather and navigating production during storm seasons? What are some things that you would do when you were in your capacity, working for a roofing contractor, that you would recommend that somebody that's maybe just starting out and maybe not be from Florida, maybe from out of state? Where do you go to find information? What do you think is most reliable, and what are some best practices?
Well, you have good paid apps out there. NOAA is, the National Weather Service is truly what they all use anyways. There's nobody that has their own weather service. They still go off of that NOAA now through NASA. I saw a story this morning actually on the news, and they're tracking it out of the Virginias, where their new satellite technology, 3D satellite, which makes projection of the storms and tracking the sands coming off of Africa. They're getting better at predicting when the storms start. Example, right now you have 3 out there. There's a third one that popped up this morning, actually this afternoon, right off of Africa. So it's the 2 that are close and 1 coming. So what I always like to do is I use NOAA. I use the National Weather Service. I found that to be the most accurate. If you're in the cone, they tell you you're in the cone, which we usually always are, because Florida's not that wide of a state. If you watch the storms come, you usually can tell they're going to say they come on a certain day, and they either get faster or slower, but most times they're slower. So a good rule of thumb for any roofer is, if you can finish a job, if they say a storm is 5 days out, you can usually figure it's going to be between 4 and 7 days. And again, disclaimer, this is just rule of thumb that I've picked up. If you can finish a job, absolutely finish it. Get it done, get off of it, get it cleaned up, and move on. You don't have to worry about storm protection. If you're on a larger project and you can't do that, I suggest you can get as much roofing as you can installed, and don't leave a large stock of material on the job. First of all, a lot of towns require you to offload it if we do get into hurricane watch. So the reason I say that is because it's going to cost you an awful lot of money to continually download jobs every time we get into a hurricane pattern, which right now I believe we are in it. I think we're starting it. It's going to continue through the rest of August into September, maybe October, where we could be facing a possible storm. I use the word possible every 2 to 3 weeks. So it becomes very tiring on the people that did it. So that's what I did. I monitored it, looked at the days, wasn't so much worried about the severity of it. Honestly, for a roofer, once you're above a Cat 1, you're pretty much anything that's up there is going to blow off anyways. It's not going to matter how you do with it. So you get it off, you download it, but use up what you can and get the roof tight. And I always made it a rule of thumb to stop all production within 24 to 48 hours of a storm that we knew was imminent to hit the state. We would just go into crisis mode by making sure everything was battened down, drains were clear, no dunnage left on the roofs, all the other things like that.
That last point, I want to make sure that the listeners, rewind and listen to that again. That's one of the things, when I've got my legal hat on, that's one of the biggest problems. You're too focused on making sure that you're getting the dollars in the door, and you don't take the time to batten down the hatches before the hurricane gets there, and then it's on top of you and you can't do anything. Something else that I want to mention, I've said this in previous conversations, but in your contract, you want a provision in there that says that in the event that you have to basically demobilize or take materials, rooftop materials off roofs or do anything like that to secure it, that you're entitled to additional compensation as a result of that. Okay. Oftentimes that can be significant. Residential jobs, not the end of the world. Larger residential, larger commercial job, there can be a lot of money associated with removing, storing, and then remobilizing after it's done. So take that into account, put a provision in your contract that allows you to protect against that. Last thing I want to talk about, John, is you and I last night to the wee hours of the morning attended the first day of the Roofing Association of New Zealand's virtual conference. And we were talking about it earlier. I was really interested in it. One of the things I think we benefit from is being able to participate internationally in roofing because it gives us insight into what's going on in the industry. And oftentimes we take what we've learned and bring it back here to our customers. So what did you enjoy about last night, and what are you looking forward to in the next few days?
Well, it's always good to get a perspective, especially sitting in our country in the roofing industry, to see one, how others do it, the challenges they're facing, and the outlooks they have. One of the speakers I think was very good last night. Basically a metal manufacturer for both structural metal building components and roofing, big over there. But they also had manufacturing facilities in Europe, Asia, and the United States and Canada. So they really had a pretty good handle on it. And when they were going through how different markets were, receding down and what was doing with the imports and different things, I think the most amazing stat that I got out of that when they were talking about what countries were using what as far as export import. I've heard this other than that. They talked about China. Of course, China exports a lot of stuff to the world. We all know that. We import a lot of it. But what I really took out of it was the fact that China's importing business, which means that they're importing steel and metal roofing, and that part of it has increased by 15%. So they've increased their sales to China. Overall, China's increased the importing capacity by 15%. So we don't really hear too much about that. We always hear about them being an economical leader as far as getting exports out. So it does seem like China is starting to import more than they have been. And I think that was an interesting fact. You don't normally hear that, but looks like another interesting fact was it looks like metal is without a doubt the major marketplace in New Zealand. They're probably the industry leader.
Yeah, and that gentleman, I think it was Robin Davies at Color Steel. Great presentation. I was glued to my seat. Granted, I was trying to keep my eyes open because it was late at night, but very interesting presentation. I tell you, tonight I'm looking forward to seeing Reed Ribble talk. I'm buying whatever that man is selling. Every time he speaks, I want to get out of my chair and charge up the hill with him. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say from an international setting. And again, I think they've done a great job with their technology and putting on that conference. So I want to thank everybody. I appreciate you guys listening to us. As always, if there's anything that you want us to talk about, hit us up. We've incorporated a lot of what you guys have sent us into future episodes. So please, contact us right there at cotneycl.com or email either one of us. I'm tcotney@cotneycl.com, and that's J. Kenney, Kenney @cotneycl.com. So thank you guys. Until next time. See ya.
Take care.